This is Twin Peaks Twin Perspective. I am Joe, and tonight I'm going to be talking about Twin Peaks The Return, Part 12. Let's rock. Full spoilers on everything Twin Peaks. So if you're not caught up with The Return through parts 12, if you haven't seen the film, if you haven't seen the original series, if you haven't read the autobiography of Cooper, if you haven't read The Secret Diary of Laura, if you haven't read The Secret History of Twin Peaks, that's what I mean when I say full spoilers on everything Twin Peaks. This episode was okay. All of them have been really good. I would say this one was probably my least favorite. I would still give it 8 out of 10. It's a wonderful hour of film, but I wouldn't necessarily say it was a great episode of television. I mean, there are some restrictions here. The way they did this, the way Frost and Lynch created the script, decided to make it 18 hours instead of 9 hours, and so we are to expect a lot of languishing moments, a lot of build up to nothing quite yet. But when you're down to 6 episodes left in the series with no promise of any additional effort, then except for the final dossier, which Mark Frost is going to release at the end of the year, then it can get frustrating, even for those of us who love Twin Peaks and love David Lynch. David Lynch does these things, and it is effective probably 88% of the time, in my opinion. And it fell a little flat. A couple of scenes did toward the end on initial viewing. Now, I've come to terms with the reintroduction of Audrey Horne in this episode. I've come to terms with it, and as a matter of fact, I like this scene more and more every time I see it. I've watched the episode 4 times now. I like to watch it 2 to 3 times the first night it airs. I like to watch it multiple times. The first time I let it envelop me. The second time I'll put the closed captioning on, and I'll try to pay attention to some of the sounds, and I'll have the dialogue there, so make sure I didn't miss anything. And then the third time I watch it, I'll jot some notes down, the basic scene by scene plot outline. I can't do that on the first viewing. Some people can, but I can't. I like to enjoy it. I like to experience it the first time. I don't want to have to be taking notes. So when you're introduced to 14 new characters in the last, basically most of them in the last 20-25 minutes of the hour, then it affects you. It's overwhelming. It takes away from whether the scene is important or not. You start to get all these new names piling up in your head, and then you're thinking, okay, I don't even know if this is going to matter or not. I know the structure of it all, and I know how Lynch is, and we better be taking notes, right? Every clock that's shown, every date that's spoken, any numbers at all, something strange that happens, and those wonderful parallels, the doubles, multiple. If someone repeats something twice, you can make a mental note. It's got to mean something, right? So when you're introduced literally to 14 new characters with 6 hours to go, it's daunting. It is definitely something that has to be experienced as a whole when it's all finished. And for the time being, it gives us a lot to talk about for sure. So I'm going to get into this. We begin the episode in South Dakota at the Mayfair Hotel. This is the FBI. They're still in Buckhorn, and Gordon and Tammy and Albert are sitting in a room in the hotel with a couch and a few seats and a beautiful red curtain and lots of member berries. And they are drinking Gordon's alcohol because Gordon stocks the FBI jet with his alcohol, and he's a connoisseur apparently. So Albert's making fun of Gordon in this scene. Gordon mishears Albert, and Albert tells Tammy to ignore the strange man. I thought that was hilarious. It seems as though Albert and Tammy have a little relationship. It's a friendship. They've grown to like each other, as opposed to Albert and Diane, who seem to get on each other's nerves every time they're around. Albert's warming up to Tammy, and for good reason, because I'm glad he is, because they're about to make Tammy an official member of the Blue Rose Task Force. Now, the story of the Blue Rose has never been succinctly defined throughout the history of Twin Peaks, but everyone in the community basically knew that a Blue Rose case was an X-file, and it meant something involving paranormal activity. It was also top secret, and only very few people would know about these cases. The military knew about it, and they explained that part to me, which I'm glad they did, because I've always imagined that this effort was a joint effort between the military and the FBI, and that's exactly what they say. When the scene first starts, Gordon is actually sweeping the room. He's making sure there are no trace or tags or mics anywhere, and then he turns his hearing aid down. He wants to make sure that nobody else around can hear this conversation. Blue Rose Task Force came up after the Blue Book project was closed in 1970. It was shut down by the Air Force, and Albert explains that even though the military and the FBI were saying everything that they found in these paranormal investigations, nothing amounted to anything, so we don't have to worry about any kind of national security threat, so they closed the project down. That was the official stance, but it was a cover-up, because there were a lot of things that were unexplained, and all of those cases that never got solved were taken on by the military and the FBI through this new task force, Blue Rose. So we know that Major Briggs was involved because he explained this pretty clearly in the series. He said that after Blue Book was closed down, he said there were several of us who continued on in an unofficial capacity. So he was speaking of Blue Rose, and him and Major Briggs and Agent Cooper were a good military FBI combination. I often wondered if the military and the FBI would really fight over jurisdiction as far as these cases go. I would assume the military would win out in the end. They have all the guns, right? So it's very top secret, and it's funny, they're toasting the whole time. They toast to the FBI. They actually toast when they mention that they covered everything up. Let's toast to the FBI. And then Albert explaining all of this to Tammy, who didn't know any of this stuff. He tells her that Philip Jeffries was going to head up the FBI portion of the Blue Rose, and Albert was part of it. Chet Desmond was part of it, and Dale Cooper. Now, they mentioned Chet Desmond. This is the first time that Chet Desmond's been brought up in the return. It was great to hear this. And they decide that Tammy's going to be part of the team. It's like a ceremony. They're toasting the whole time with this awesome, I guess it's part of his Bordeaux collection or whatever. So then when they're all done with the conversation, Gordon turns his hearing aid back up, and this is great. No surprises. He warned, no sharp noises. It's hilarious. Then he gets a little text and says, "Hey, Diane's on her way." And Diane enters the room through the red curtain. And funny how a lot of you are doubting Diane, but this episode gave me a weird feeling. And oddly enough, at the end of it, I'm starting to think there's no one in the FBI that you can trust. And possibly the only one who really knows what's going on is Diane. Now, I'm probably the only one that feels that way, but anyway. Diane enters. She gets a whole bottle of vodka to herself. She says she likes it on the rocks, but Albert doesn't even bother to pour it for her. He says, well, you're lucky. The Dakotas are still in the Ice Age. So she has to get her own rocks and pour her own drink. And it's a completely different dynamic. Albert, Tammy, and Gordon all drank their drinks together. They cheered, drink, cheer, drink. Here's a toast, drink. And then Diane makes her drink. There's no celebration at all. As a matter of fact, it was quite the opposite of a celebration. So Diane takes her drink, and I'm waiting for her to say, so what the fuck's going on, or something like that. But Albert begins to talk. And he tells Diane that they know that she's familiar with Blue Rose cases because of the dictations that she received from Cooper. And they offer to deputize her so she can remain part of the group. And Diane immediately wants to know what she's going to get out of it. And Albert says, well, you'll get a little bit of money, and that's about it, but you'll get to figure out, perhaps, what happened to your friend Cooper. And Diane doesn't take too long to think about it. She looks right at Gordon Cole, and she says, let's rock. And the familiar Fire Walk Me music play in the background. This imagery can bring your mind to so many different places, and everybody has their own opinion. It's a beautiful thing, and that's why Lynch is my favorite filmmaker, because he'll create these scenes and have 5 different people feel 5 different ways about it, especially when you're trying to figure out the plot, especially when you're trying to figure out which one's doing what. You know, those things, you know, in regular television, those things are easily defined, but we're not sure what anyone's motivation is right now. So I've still got a lot of faith in Diane. As a matter of fact, I've gotten even more since this episode. I think the reason why Diane is being secretive about what she's doing is because she is getting information. She's one step ahead of Gordon. Las Vegas, for instance. I figured that the FBI, Gordon and Albert and Tammy, were going to look into this wedding ring that was inside of Major Briggs' stomach. It's Dougie's wedding ring. To Dougie love Janie E. and with love Janie E. And they'll put Dougie Jones, Janie E. together. They'll figure it out, and that clue would bring them to Las Vegas. Well, Diane's already one step ahead of the game, and it makes me think that the person she's communicating with is someone who can time travel, someone who can leap forward and see the future, and you know, Philip Jeffries did this in Fire Walk with Me. I have a lot of hope that David Bowie's going to make a cameo, that they managed to film something with him before he passed away, and so I am stuck on this thought that she is communicating with Philip Jeffries, and that he knows they're supposed to go to Las Vegas. He asked Diane, well, what about Las Vegas? And she's like, well, they haven't asked yet. You know, that question is probably going to be, Diane, you mind coming with us to Las Vegas? Well, she's part of the team now. I guess she's going to have to go. We'll see. I don't know if this is where my mind's at. Okay, so the next scene, we go to Twin Peaks. Beautiful shot of the mountain, beautiful shot of the woods, and out of the woods and over the hill comes Jerry Horn. It seems he has made his way out of the woods, and he's running. He seems to have both his feet, that's good. And he falls down once and gets right back up, and that's the end of that. Now we go to a grocery store in Twin Peaks, I'm assuming. Familiar shot of Sarah Palmer walking down the liquor aisle which was in the trailers, one of the trailers before the series started. And she's buying vodka. She's buying, is it vodka? I think so. Weird. There's 3 bottles on the shelf. She's actually wanting more. But she figures, oh well, there's this look in her face when she does it. It's almost like I'd have to come out here again, into the public to get this 4th bottle of alcohol. Well, I'm doing it now. Might as well chug away. So she gets to cashing everything out. The cash out girl rings her up. The bag boy's bagging everything up. And Sarah notices a different kind of beef jerky hanging up in the back behind where the girl's checking her out. There's the beef jerky, and then there's turkey jerky. And of course, turkey reminds me of Laura from Fire Walk With Me. She's long gone, like a turkey in the corn. And Sarah gets transfixed on this. She starts to ask when it arrived. She says, that's new. I don't remember seeing that before. Were you here when it showed up? And then she started talking about how the men were coming, that things could happen, and that things happened to her. She said, something happened to me. Something happened to me. She's increasingly agitated to where she was screaming, and she was trying to warn these kids that they need to watch it because stuff will happen. I don't know who she meant when she said men are coming, but I gotta assume it's Mr. C. I gotta assume it's the convergence of the good and evil that's gonna happen here. 253 yards east of Jack Rabbit's palace, but we'll see. And then all of a sudden, it's almost as if Sarah, and you can take this 2 ways, she either starts convincing herself that this isn't the place to be doing this, to get out of this situation. If this grocery store makes you feel bad, if this new jerky makes you feel bad, then just get out of here, grab your car keys and go. Or you could think that she's mentally ill, a little schizophrenia or something like that, and that she starts talking to herself, and it's another facet of her personality, perhaps, is trying to convince her to leave. Or this is Twin Peaks, so you can assume that something is inhabiting her, and it's some other force telling her to be quiet, don't say anything else, walk out, grab your car keys and go. Whichever one it is, we'll have to wait and see, because she appears again in the episode, and nothing comes out of it, except for the same questions. You don't get any resolution. You actually get more questions. That was an excellent scene. And right now, at this point in the episode, I'm thinking this is one of the best episodes I've seen. Then we go to the Fat Chop Trailer Park and talk about beautiful. There's a guy there named Chris Cole who seems to be walking to his trailer, and Carl Rod comes out of his trailer. He asks Chris Cole if he's been donating blood for money so that he can eat. And Chris Cole says, yeah. So Carl's like, well, you've been replacing things around, you've been cutting grass, you've been sweeping up and cleaning up, and you never got paid for any of it. So Carl gave him $50, and Carl told him, next time rent's due, don't worry about paying it. And Carl told him no one should sell blood so they can eat. And he told him the next time he needs something to call on Carl Rod, and he'll do something for him. So Carl's a good guy. My brother and I have been talking about this for weeks now, Agents of Good. And Carl was he was irritable in Fire Walk With Me. He was put upon in Fire Walk With Me, and it seemed like he was struggling to find this peaceful balance, to be able to handle all of this. He was always bothered. People woke him up early, and he just kept on, this is just more stuff I gotta do, and then you see what I mean, and this is what I gotta deal with. But at the end of the day, even in Fire Walk with Me, he was offering up the agents a good, strong cup of Good Morning America. It's the best goddamn coffee you'll drink anywhere, buddy. So Carl's a great guy, and that was a sweet moment with yet another character, new character, this Briscoe. So then we go to Las Vegas. One quick 20-second scene in Las Vegas, maybe even 15 seconds. We see the shadow of the bird flying over the Jones residence. Then we see Sonny Jim and Dougie walking outside to the backyard. They've got baseball gloves on. Sonny Jim positions Dougie. Sonny Jim gets in position. He throws the ball and it hits Dougie, and that's just one of the things you see it in lots of movies, usually comedies. The frisbee hits the guy in the head. Yeah, y'all seen all that. So that was it. That was not only Dougie's only scene, and not only the only scene in Las Vegas, that was the only scene Kyle MacLachlan was in for the whole episode. But we still keep that good feeling because we go straight back into Twin Peaks, and it's raining, and it's cloudy. And the original series, and especially the pilot in the original series, it was always raining in Twin Peaks in the beginning. And almost every scene to a scene up until now was clear blue sunshine. We saw a couple of cloudy nights and the clouds rolling over the mountains and the clouds covering the moon. But when it was during the day, the sun was shining through the pines. Finally, we get that old Twin Peaks feeling and Fire Walk with Me feeling of the thunder rolling when Hawk pulls up in front of the Palmer residence. Amazing, they could do that all day, and they would have kept every Twin Peaks fan out there probably. Hawk walks up the stairs, knocks on the door, takes a little bit, but then Sarah Palmer answers. And she looks like she's been drinking. She's had a few drinks, and it goes back to that which way do you want to look at it thing in the grocery store. Either she's really inhabited by an entity, or she's struggling either with a mental capacity or perhaps and then alcohol is what she uses to medicate herself to calm down. So she's managed to get away from the public, gotten back inside her house, and had a few drinks. She seems a lot more level-headed at first. Hawk pretends like it's a social visit, but Sarah says, I'm sure this has something to do with the grocery store. And he says, yeah, I heard about that. Everybody was worried about you. And there's a sound in the kitchen. It sounds like somebody's moving around dishes or pots and pans. And Hawk asks, is there someone in the house? And Sarah says, no, that's just something in the kitchen. So weird. And then Hawk says, are you okay? He starts to ask her whether she needs help. And she replies, she says, goddamn bad story, isn't it, Hawk? It's almost as if that lie she told about no one being in the house was such an obvious lie. She's like, goddamn bad story, isn't it, Hawk? Either that or she's talking about the whole story of herself, but, and what happened with her losing her daughter and her husband. But I felt like it was the lie that she just told. And at that point, I'm expecting Hawk to walk in, but he doesn't. He says, if you need anything, Sarah, any help of any kind, and he's insinuating, even if you think it's kooky, you can call on us and we'll come and help you. And her attitude from 1 minute to the next, very, very next line, she's like, thanks, Hawk, and closes the door like she was aggravated again. was almost like a part of her was trying to come out for just a brief minute there, saying, "The goddamn bad story, isn't it, Hawk?" You know, was that a Bob-like creature coming out, you know, or was that the real Sarah trying to get a hold of you? And just wow, just have your mind running for days, and the whole time Laura Palmer's theme is playing, so it's just gorgeous. And we go from this epic monumental scene straight into Calhoun Memorial Hospital and the hall in the hospital. Such a foreboding sight. Foreboding sight. And you know, I just wanted to creep up really slow down that hall forever, but you know, we only get a little bit, and then we start creeping slowly up a hospital bed, starting with the feet and working your way up. And I knew as soon as I saw the feet that it was Miriam, because I'd said in the last review and recap, since we knew that Miriam was alive, so maybe we'll finally get Calhoun Memorial. And Miriam will be there, and then Norma and Shelley will bring her the pie that they promised her, and I'm sure that's coming up. What's weird is, although this is the first time we see Calhoun Memorial in the entire return, no one referred to it as Calhoun. The name wasn't said once. Ben talks later and says, the hospital. Everybody says the hospital, but nobody says Calhoun. Maybe that's because it's probably the only hospital. But, weird. I wanted to hear that name. You mean Calhoun? You know, that'll just confuse people who've never watched the original series even further. But, hey, all of us veterans are confused enough as it is. Now, what's strange about the Miriam scene in the hospital is, as you're creeping up and seeing who's in the bed, you listen to the sounds in the background, and the first thing you hear is the door opens. Then you hear footsteps of someone entering the room. Then you hear the door close. And then you hear these beeping sounds, and all of a sudden another one starts, and it's a fast one. Beep, 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 beep. And it's eerily similar to Leland killing Jacques, and that fire alarm stopping, and it just gave me the frisons. Did Richard Horne have the balls to sneak into that hospital and kill Miriam while she's in that hospital bed? I don't know. We'll see. That was scary, and those sounds were there. At first, first viewing, I thought it's just somebody walking, doors opening and closing down the hall, people walking down the hall. But then that little sound started, beep, 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 beep. And after the second viewing, I was convinced that somebody went in there and messed with her. All right, the next scene, we go back to South Dakota. Diane, I think she's in the bar, and she's got her phone, and she has received a text that asks Las Vegas, and Diane sends the reply, they haven't asked yet. I spoke about that already. It seems to me like as though she knows she's one step ahead of everybody else in this. Then we go to the Great Northern Hotel in Twin Peaks, and we have another incredible classic Twin Peaks scene. Beverly tells Ben that Sheriff Frank Truman is there to see him, and Ben seems to know Frank. Frank comes in, they shake hands, Frank sits down, and then Ben sits down, and then there's this awkward silence, this awkward pause before Frank says what he has to say. And when this happens, it's foreshadowing for a lot of what happens in the rest of the episode. I mean, we saw shades of it before, but in this instance, it works. Frank Truman is nervous about telling Ben what he has to tell him. And then he comes out and says it. He says, there's no easy way to tell you this, but your grandson, Richard, is the one that ran over that boy. And Ben, you know, he's upset. But Ben starts to stress that Richard's had problems his whole life. The sheriff says not only did he kill the boy, but he tried to kill the only known witness to the accident, and her name is Miriam Sullivan. She's a nursery school teacher. She needs an operation, and she's in the hospital. So, and then Truman asked if Ben wouldn't mind paying for the surgery. And so, yeah, Ben's like, of course, I'll pay for the operation, of course, you know. What were they going to do? Let her die? Calvin, that strap for cash? I mean, come on, it didn't make sense. Anyway, that's when Ben says, about Richard, Ben says, that boy has never been right. And that puts me right at believing Mr. C is his father, Richard's father. That boy's never been right. And he says later on that Richard never had a father. And that could mean Johnny. If Johnny's his real father, he never really had a father because Johnny couldn't be a father. I don't know how he would father a kid, being that he doesn't seem to be mentally capable of understanding a lot. But it could also mean Richard never had a father because John Justice Wheeler flew to the other side of the globe and never came back. And that's probably what they all think. No one knows what really happened. Mr. C, if he did assault Audrey while she was in a coma, Audrey would have had that kid thinking it was John Justice Wheeler's, and you know, we haven't heard Jack's name yet, so we'll see. We've seen a Jack, but not John Justice Wheeler Jack. So Ben also mentions that Harry Truman had several run-ins with Richard. Everything was progressively worse and worse, each crime, you know, but nothing serious. And then Ben wonders if Richard's in jail. And Truman says no, he's not in jail, he's still on the run. So you gotta let us know if he gets a hold of you. We'll let you know if something happens. Ben's laughing because he knows Richard's never going to contact him. They quit talking ever since Ben quit sending Richard money. And during this conversation, we see the hotel key, room 315, sitting there in the front of Ben's desk, and then Ben sees it and starts laughing and says, I was going to send this to Harry. I was wondering if he'd want it. It got sent here a couple of days ago in the mail. We haven't used a key like this in over 20 years. It's room 315, and if I'm not mistaken, that was the room that Cooper was in. And so I guess he realizes Harry and Cooper were really good friends, and so he figured Harry would like to keep it as a memento. And this is really strange to Frank Truman, because he's like, okay, interesting, because we just opened up a case, an old case involving Agent Cooper. It's strange how this key shows up all of a sudden after all this time. And Ben says he was kind of struggling with it too, but there's this look on Ben. You know, Ben's got a lot of skeletons in the closet, and if anything old starts to get dug up, it could certainly incriminate Benjamin Horne for the numerous crimes that he committed in his past. And I've been saying since the return started that Ben is a changed man. He won the Civil War, he beat his own setback, and he tried so hard to be a good man, and he's still doing it to this day. And you know, it's a testament to him, because it's a daily battle. He says it regarding Dick Germain in season 2. Sometimes the urge to do bad is almost overwhelming. But he's willing to do all this. Now he's sick of sending Sylvia money, but he's willing to help out with the surgery or the payment for the surgery for Miriam. And then he didn't jump in the sack with Beverly. He asked her to go to dinner, people. He hasn't slept with Beverly. That hasn't happened, okay? So get that out of your heads. I'm sorry if I come off like a pompous ass sometimes. It's just my demeanor, and we all love Twin Peaks, and we take it personally. So I'm game for anything. But, some things are just, to me, crystal clear. And Ben Horne is a changed man, and I hope everyone saw that after this scene. He stressed that Richard never had a father. And then after Truman leaves, Beverly comes in, and Ben starts talking to Beverly about his childhood. First he tells Beverly about Richard, and she says, "I'm so sorry." And then he starts to talk about his childhood. He remembers a Schwinn bike that his dad got him, 2 different color greens, and painted on it, brand new seat. It had fat tires, and it was hard as hell to ride, but he loved that bike. And later on he says it again, "I love that bike that my father gave to me." And of course, this is what can happen to a child if they don't have a father figure. And we've seen it in the prior episode with all the crazy parents running around in the middle of the street in front of the double R. Last episode, Bobby's the only one that seems to have any sense, and he's probably estranged from seeing Becky for some reason. I don't know. I'd love to see that dynamic expanded further, since we as the audience didn't even know Bobby was her father until now. It's almost as if they never talk, never see each other, because we just saw her running to Shelley for money. And since she does drugs, she probably doesn't want to go hang out with Daddy since he's a cop. But I would love for those relationships to grow. I'd love to see them focus on stuff like that, because this kind of scene with Ben thinking about his father and the gift he had, he's struggling with the sins of his past, and he just remembers being a child. And he did this in the second season. He recalled the girl dancing with the flashlight, and that was when he was in jail. He got to his lowest point, and he tried to remember some good stuff from his past, bring him back to his youth. And I'm proud of Ben. I really am. I think Ben's doing good, but there's regret there. And another thing that was really funny, when Ben's telling Beverly to call the hospital that he's going to pay for Miriam's surgery operation, he forgets Miriam's last name. The sheriff clearly said Miriam Sullivan, and then Ben forgets her last name, which is hilarious because because of the community, we figured out that envelope was from a Miriam Hodges, and it's just one of those indications that let you know that Mark Frost and David Lynch know what's going on. They can even anticipate how things are going to be looked at in this show, and how they should be looked at in this show. That's why a lot of people don't like Twin Peaks: The Return, because you have to think about it too much. You have to pay attention too much. That's why I like doing these shows, because I love the show, and I'm going to talk about it. I'm going to think about it all the time, and I'm a fan, so I might as well give you guys some content, from a person that loves the show and loves David Lynch, and not just some of these that don't know what the heck they're talking about. There's a bunch of good shows out there from people who love Twin Peaks, and there's people who are fair and critical, and they love it, and they're fair and critical, and I can't bash them when they're being critical about it, when it's something that doesn't jive with their opinion. I mean, that's how we all are. I mean, a lot of people said part 11 was their favorite part of the whole series, and I can see that. Even though I gave it a 9 out of 10, I can see how people would say it was the best. Okay, so the next scene, we go back to South Dakota, and this, for me, is when the episode's talk starts to take a turn, because up until this point it's been full-blown ingenious and maddening and beautiful and romantic, and now it turns into a farce to a degree. And that's all due to me and my anticipation, my expectations, what I want to see happen, knowing that we don't have much time left. We see Gordon sitting in a room with a French girl. I don't know what Lynch's intentions are when he does these things, and you know, you can judge me for the way I look at it. I'm not trying to degrade women or anything. I'm just basing it on this character. A lot of people said this character looked like a prostitute or a hooker. I don't think that way, but what she does look like to me is the quintessential 40s, 50s pinup girl. This is the girl that you wish would work in your office. And back then, men were weird with women, so you know, and awful with women, especially if the men were in a position of power. So that's what I got from it, and it just made me feel weird because she was a gorgeous woman, and the way she exited the scene, you know, was wonderful, and it was, you know, if you want to look at it from the character Gordon Cole's point of view, who's sitting there smiling at her the whole time, she's taking forever. Or you can take the attitude of Gordon, of Albert, Albert's standing there waiting for this girl to leave. Albert shows up and needs to tell Gordon something, and Gordon has to stop this romantic date with the French girl. Okay, he's in the room with the French girl telling her old FBI stories, the same shtick he used with Shelley in the Double R, and there's a knock on the door. It's Albert. Albert has something important to say, and everybody in the audience knows that Albert's intercepted the text that Diane received, and then the text Diane sent, and that Albert's coming in to tell Gordon. And that's the main reason why this scene pissed me off, because they need a moment alone. This is literally a matter of national security, and this woman takes 3.5 to 5 minutes to freaking leave. I mean, I don't know how long it was, but it felt that way. She does up her lipstick and takes another drink. She shows off her chic shoes or whatever Gordon says, chic or whatever. Oh, Jesus. I know that's the kind of girl to make you wish you spoke a little French. That was the funniest scene ever in the history of television. It worked then. This girl ain't Shelley to me, and I still think he's got a thing for Tammy. So even though he's telling FBI stories to this French chick, I think he still has the hots for Tammy. But we'll see. Maybe if the FBI ends up in Las Vegas, he'll be shacked up with a few girls there. You know, don't judge me on how I'm looking at these characters. This is how the characters appear to me. This scene was annoying. And then after she finally gets the hell out of there, Gordon seems put upon. He wants to joke around, and he thinks Albert's being a stiff. And then when Albert finally tells Gordon what's up, the only thing Gordon says is, he's like, what do we know that we haven't asked her about? We'll figure it out, but for now, I want to get back to this girl and drink because, you know, it's nighttime and I've got things to do, and that's way more important. Are you serious? This is what makes me think that Diane's the only one that knows what's going on, and the rest of them are crazy. That scene right there, come on, Gordon, what are we doing? I mean, this is the FBI just on taxpayers' expense. We're going to spend a few more nights in South Dakota because I like this girl. Yeah, okay, I'm a fan and I love it, but I've got to complain about that scene. Now, aesthetically, it was beautiful. Any shot that you want to pick will be a beautiful shot, memorable shot, gorgeous woman. And yes, I felt like Albert standing there like, can we move the show on, please? And it doesn't stop in this episode. It continues after that. The next scene, I'm going to say, still in South Dakota, except this is down in Yankton. The warden is driving home, and Chantal and Hutch are in a van, and they draw a bead on the warden and take him out, shoot him twice in the back of the head. The whole time before they're waiting for the warden, and Hutch asks Chantal, you sure you don't want to torture him? And she's like, we passed a Wendy's. I'm hungry. And he said, well, Hutch says, I could shoot him in the legs. We can kidnap him. And then you could eat and then you could torture him later. And she's like, I said I'm hungry. And he's like, okay, I was just making sure. The problems of hired hitmen. And then Hutch takes him out. There's a beautiful shot of Hutch's eye and the target. Peter Deming, it's hard to get a shot like that. That's a beautiful thing. The focus goes from Tim Roth's face to the eye that's looking out. It's just gorgeous. The warden gets shot twice, and then his son comes right out the front door and sees him laying there dead, and the son starts screaming, "Daddy, Daddy, no!" And Hutch and Chantal, just drive away. Hutch says, "Oh, next stop, Wendy's." So that was that. I noticed that Chantal was still eating them Cheetos. Well, she's got a thing. She was, the first time the ward got shot, she was licking her lip, licking her finger, like she, they don't care. She was probably wanting to lick his blood or something. These guys are crazy. Okay, now we go back to Twin Peaks, and we have Dr. Amp, and Nadine's watching him. Dr. Amp's doing his show, and he hasn't repeated a show, but this time it's a repeat. It's the first show we ever heard him do, and Nadine's wearing the same clothes. Nadine says the same line she said when she was reintroduced to us, except they let it go on, and there's more lines. She continues. And there's extra stuff that Dr. Amp says, which they put in there too, but it's the same one from the first time we saw Dr. Amp. So this is, I'm going to assume, it's just coincidence Nadine's wearing the same clothes and it's a repeat program? Or is this the same day that happened back in, 7, 8 episodes ago? I don't know. But it was interesting. Something new that Dr. Amp did say, though, that made me laugh was they eat, drink, and shit money. That was just hilarious. Continuing to talk about the politicians who work for their donors and their contributors, and they don't work for the people who elect them. And that's what he's getting at. So it's not about Republican and Democrat people. It's about the person who's not bought by corporations, who's going to get up there and pass laws that benefit people and not corporations. So if you think you're a great believer in politics, you love your Republican Party or you love your Democratic Party, please study the candidate anyway, okay? Because if they're taking money from the pharmaceutical industry or the health insurance industry, they're not going to pass a health care bill that's going to help you at all, okay? They're going to pass one that's going to make the CEO of United Healthcare $60 million a year, and in return he's going to donate money to that politician because he passed that nice law which gave him that big old chunk of money, and it's a revolving door and you get it, okay? That's what Dr. Amp's talking about, all right? They eat, drink, and shit money. I love that. And then he warns, Dr. Amp tells these politicians that the 9th level of hell will welcome you. And those were the 2 lines that I liked, that I got out of Dr. Amp this week. Thank you, Dr. Amp. Keep them coming because I love it. Yes, politicians who take corporation money and then pass laws to benefit those corporations, they eat, drink, and shit money. And the 9th level of hell will welcome them. Thank you, Dr. Amp. All right. Now, back to the crazy, because that was strenuous too. I mean, this is the same scene. We're watching the same scene from Dr. Amp over. At least they gave us a little addition. So, but again, we're like, okay, we're wasting time here. I mean, when did we slam on the brakes in this episode? The French girl, and then, okay, Dr. Amp's okay, but we saw this already, the first half. And then we get introduced to Audrey. And it's not your typical Audrey introduction. We don't start from the shoes and work our way up the legs. We don't get the freshly squeezed theme. You don't hear the doo-doo-doo-doo, doo. I haven't heard that theme yet. No, haven't heard it yet. We haven't heard. I haven't heard none of that yet. What we get is Audrey standing there, and she's looking a little impatient, and the camera draws across the room until we see this other man. First thing I thought when I saw this guy sitting there was, is that the same guy in the picture with Mr. C in New York? He's bald, he's got glasses. I don't know the actor. He's in a lot of movies and TV, I guess, and people know him from Fringe and Blacklist, and I don't know if he's a midget, dwarf, short person. I don't know if he's got some sort of disability. It looked as if he was really struggling, thinking about having to get out of that chair to go up and help Audrey. She wanted him to go to the Roadhouse. So I don't know what his stature is, his physique or anything. So to compare that actor to the person that's in the picture might be stupid for me, but I'll just have to go back and look later. Sorry, I didn't do it before this video. But that was the impression I got. And then when I find out that Audrey is married to this man named Charlie, she's married to him out of almost a convenience, as some sort of contractual obligation. It got me thinking, man, she hooked up with him so she could find Coop. He has something to do with this box in New York, and she's trying to find Coop, and that's the reason why they're together. And then for some reason, he makes the deal with Mr. C, or he tells Audrey he's not involved with the box anymore, and so now Audrey says, you've lost your balls, and I won't have nothing to do with you. So it's kind of where my mind is right now on this. Until I'm proven wrong, I'll see. As soon as I see a picture of the actor, I'll probably go, nope, that's not him. Oops, so well. But anyway, Audrey Horne has a foul mouth now, and she doesn't like her husband at all. She wants to go to the Roadhouse to find Billy. Billy is somebody who she says she loves and who she's also sleeping with. She wants to go to the Roadhouse even though Billy hates the Roadhouse, but that's the only other place they haven't gone yet. And Audrey tells her husband that he's a spineless, no-balls loser and wants to know if he knows this, because he really is. That's what you are. Sherilyn Fenn gave a good performance here, I thought. I loved it. It was a bit shocking. And for people who have been dying to see Audrey, they were probably really aggravated that she was in this situation. Well, like I say, you kind of want her to just make an entrance, but this was an entrance kind of like Diane made. She told her husband, he says to Audrey, I know you appreciate what I do for you. You tell me every day, or you used to tell me every day. And Audrey says, do I have to thank you every day? Get on my knees and thank you and worship you. It's like, he did something for Audrey, and not sure what that is, but God, if he's connected to that box in New York, that would be interesting. She admits she's sleeping with Billy, but I think he already knew this. And then she said she had a dream about Billy last night, and that Billy was bleeding from the mouth and the nose. And Audrey wants Charlie to sign the papers. I don't know what the papers are. Some people think it's divorce papers. And he starts to talk about how he has his rights as a spouse. They're lawfully wedded. And then she says, you gave up those rights. And he said, what? Like this was something he was unaware of. And then he says, you're not going to renege on the contract. So I think basically she's saying, you let me down. You don't have balls anymore. He was doing something noble and something that took courage, and then he stopped doing it, and so she's done with him now. She said, let's call a spade a spade. And in Twin Peaks, that means we need to get a divorce. He says he's not going to sign the papers. He's got to run him by his lawyer. And then Audrey says, oh, maybe we should run him by Paul. Would you like Paul to come around and pay a visit to you? And it's very strange. And also another character that's added on. Audrey complains that she's probably going to have to go find Tina, and she doesn't like Tina. But according to Chuck, Tina was the last person to see Billy before he went missing 2 days ago. Okay, so Audrey says she doesn't trust Chuck, and she can't stand to be in the same room with Tina. All right, now I got notes out of the yin yang here. Turn the page. Okay, so Chuck, and believe me, this is another reason why this episode is only an 8 out of 10, because you got all this incredible, beautiful 28, 35 minutes of Twin Peaks, full-blown Twin Peaks, all the FBI characters, all the locations and the rain and the music from Fire Walk with Me, and we're just there, and then we slam on the brakes with all this stuff, and what really got to me was all the new characters. So all of a sudden, in order for me to keep up with everything, I'm having to focus on what's going on with these 14, literally 14 new characters introduced in one episode with only 6 hours to go. And it made me forget how beautiful the other scenes were. By the time this episode ended, all I could think about was Audrey and how we wasted another 5 minutes in the Roadhouse with a bunch of people we don't know about, talking about people we don't know about. It's like Invitation to Love is taking place in the Roadhouse. Cameron gave credit to someone for saying that, and I got to give him credit for it. It's true. You get introduced to 14 new characters right at the end of an episode, and you kind of forget all this beauty of the episode from before. I did, with the ceiling fan at the Palmer house going on. It was so gorgeous, and I forgot to mention that too, because I'm sitting here trying to wrap my head around what happened between Chuck and Tina and Billy. Okay, so Chuck told Audrey that Tina was the last person to see Billy. And Charlie thinks this is strange because Chuck supposedly stole Billy's truck. Audrey didn't know about this. So Charlie explains the story. Yeah, Billy looked outside, saw Chuck taking off with his truck, so he called the sheriff. Billy called the sheriff. Then the sheriff found the truck, or the truck ended up back in Billy's, I guess. And then Billy got his truck back, so Billy dropped the charges against Chuck. So now Chuck's turning around and telling Audrey that Tina was the last person that saw Billy, and Billy's missing. So if Chuck stole Billy's truck, maybe Chuck doesn't like Billy all that much, and then Billy's missing. So Chuck would say somebody else saw him. So apparently Charlie knows Tina. Charlie's going to call Tina. I kind of got the impression Chuck was Tina's husband. But anyway, we do find out that Tina won't talk if her husband's there. And Charlie says, I'll tell Tina I'm alone. So Tina will talk to me too. And so Chuck calls Tina on a rotary phone. Even that took forever. Okay, so yeah, Tina's aggravated because it's late. But Charlie asks, he says, Chuck says you were the last person to see Billy. And then we get the long conversation, except the only person doing most of the talking is on the other end and we don't hear her. Tina starts to tell Charlie the story. And Charlie's answering, and we keep going back to Audrey, and Audrey's just pissed. She's been wanting to leave now for 10 minutes like everybody else. And she's even biting her lip and yelling. So, but when you start to put the pieces together, the scene plays out so much better. So what's going on is the story that Charlie and Audrey knows is that Chuck stole Billy's truck, and then Chuck returned the truck, and then Billy didn't press charges. Tina's supposed to know where Billy's at. Tina's the last person that saw him. But what Charlie's getting from Tina is the truth. And the truth is that Richard stole the truck. I don't know if Richard stole the truck from Chuck or directly from Billy. But Richard stole the truck. And Charlie knows who Richard is because Richard is Audrey's kid. And at the end of the conversation, Charlie is assuring Tina, I promise I won't. He won't tell Audrey what he just found out. And Audrey gets so pissed when the conversation ends. She's like, you're not going to tell me? And she feels like the rest of the audience. We waited through all of that, and you're not going to tell me what was said? But I think I figured out that conversation. It must be about Richard. It had everything to do with Miriam surviving, Richard running over the kid with the truck, and Miriam pinning Richard, and possibly even that Richard's probably the one that killed Billy, and Billy's dead. So interesting and hard times for Audrey. Everybody thought she'd turn out to be great, and I guess she's affected like everybody else in Twin Peaks. The black corn. Okay, now we're going to South Dakota one more time. Diane is in the bar again. She realizes it's closed, but the bartender gives her a drink anyway. And she's stoked about that. And then she Google maps the coordinates, and she remembers the coordinates she saw on Ruth Davenport's arm, and she uses some weird word recognition thing, coordinates +2, something like that. And the coordinates come up Twin Peaks. Unbelievable. Twin Peaks, Washington. This is where the coordinates lead, and this is where I thought the coordinates were leading all along. It's not Glastonbury Grove, but it is 253 yards east of Jack Rabbit's palace. And Mr. C wants those coordinates. So, and I'm assuming Diane's going to send them to somebody. Hopefully she sends them to Jeffries, and whoever this Jeffries cat isn't a middleman sending it back to Mr. C, because I really don't think Diane's working directly with Mr. C. At least she doesn't think she is. I know there's that question of perhaps she's being blackmailed and stuff like that too, but no, she's got enough guns on her side. I don't think she'd let something like that go down. The sound that you hear when the coordinates come up and the map says Twin Peaks, that is the same sound that you hear in Beverly's office in the Great Northern. That's the same sound. And it's also blending in with the vacuum cleaner that's going on in the background. And it also blends into the woods. We get that overhead night shot of Twin Peaks woods. But that is the same sound from Beverly's office. The guy vacuuming in the background in the bar, that's to me, that's a callback to Wild at Heart. That's a callback to Mulholland Drive, and that's a callback to Twin Peaks and One-Eyed Jacks. So those little touches I love from Lynch. Thank you, Lynch. And then we end in the Roadhouse. And it's Natalie and Abby. These are two people we've been waiting 25 years to hear from. Natalie and Abby are talking. Angela's a friend of theirs, and Angela is a really nice girl, and right now Angela's got the hots for Clark. Now, Angela is so hot and bothered for Clark that she's been dreaming about Clark. But Abby thinks this is strange, because Abby was in the Roadhouse a couple of days earlier and saw Clark there. He was in the corner dancing with Mary. And they were dancing, and they looked like they were almost going to kiss. And this really bothers Natalie, because she doesn't like Mary, and she knows that her good friend Angela doesn't like Mary either. And the problem is Angela's falling for Clark. Angela's dreaming about Clark. Angela's so in love with Clark that they're afraid that if Angela finds out Clark was dancing in a corner with Mary, that it's going to throw Angela over the edge. Apparently, Angela's mother died in some very strange way. And Angela is always on the edge, and now she's off her meds. So if Angela finds out that Clark is cheating on her with Mary, who could be Mary Ann, I don't know. We've heard of a Mary Ann before, but I'm going to assume Mary's a new character introduced to us. We haven't seen either one of them. This is going to push Angela off the edge. And the sad thing is, it happened at the Roadhouse and a bunch of people witnessed it. So Okay, y'all got all that right. This was something I know you've been waiting 12 hours to find out, but my God, if Angela finds out that Clark was dancing with Mary in the corner of the roadhouse a couple of days ago, it might throw her crazy because she's off her meds, and it's really hard to deal with life, especially when you lose your mother the way that Angela did. Okay, so now that we got all that out of the way, Trick shows up, and Trick, you guys know Trick. Trick's been all over the place. Man, Trick shows up, and he's fretting because a vehicle almost ran him over. I guess Trick was riding his bike, and this big truck or something comes by and runs him off the road. Boy, he wishes he could find that person because he wants to beat him up. Then Trick goes get a drink. These girls are drinking Heineken, which makes me think they're not the same kind of girls that we saw a couple episodes ago, the one with the rash and the other girl. They look like they were tricking and whoring. These girls looked a little more classy. Like they would have an issue with drugs, right? They would have an issue with somebody who actually dealt with drugs. Trick goes off to get the beers, and we find out that Trick was in house arrest, but he's not anymore, so he's a free man. So don't know if Abby's really excited about this or not, but Trick's available, and then we finish the episode with a performance by the Chromatics. And that was it. So 14 new characters introduced to us in this episode. And I'll list them real quick. You had the checkout girl, you had the bag boy, you had Chris Cole, you had the French girl, you had the warden's son. You never know if these characters are going to come back in or not either. You had Billy, but we heard of Billy before, so I'm not going to count Billy. Could be a different Billy, but we'll see. Then you got Paul, then you got Charlie, you got Tina, you got Chuck, you got Natalie, Abby, Angela, Clark, and Mary, who could be Mary Ann. So Billy could be the other Billy that Bing was running around looking for. And Mary could be Mary Ann, the one that Richard was supposed to get the rest of the sparkle from. So there. That was it. Twin Peaks: The Return, Part 12. And at least 14 new characters. So my guess last week was that Cooper was going to be the one to say, "Let's rock." The only thing he got was a baseball thrown in his chest. That could have been like a rock. If throwing the baseball would have reminded him of throwing the rocks at a bottle, that could have worked out. But no, he didn't say "Let's rock." Diane said "Let's rock," and a lot of people think that that's another indication that she's a bad person because the arm said "Let's rock" in the original series. So, not me. I think Diane's good, and after this episode, I've got my questions about the entirety of the FBI. I mean, Gordon just seemed too nonchalant. Now, maybe his intentions are good, but he's letting his other head make all the decisions for him right now. Okay? And if I was Albert, I would have taken one of them bottles and gone back to my room and called up Constance, because Constance is a hottie. I love Constance. Oh, she's so great. And her and Albert are great together. I hope Albert decides to retire before he ends up missing like the rest of these Blue Rose agents. But I wouldn't worry about Tammy, because Tammy writes The Secret History of Twin Peaks. She's the one that compiles the dossier, and this happens after the events which are going on now in Twin Peaks, I believe. So I think Tammy's going to be there for the long haul. I don't think Tammy's a bad girl, and if Tammy is a bad girl, she obviously comes around to do this work for Gordon later on, unless of course Gordon's up to no good either. Those are all the questions that I have. A lot of this episode was satisfying, and a lot of it was tedious, and am I saying that right? And so it just rubbed me the wrong way, but toward the end. But like I said, I came to love that scene with Audrey, because I believe I know what's going on. The reason why I won't tell Audrey about the conversation is because it's her son. And I believe next week's episode, which is called "What Story Is That, Charlie?" I believe those words will be said by Audrey, and I believe that story is going to be about her son, Richard. And I have to assume that the next we got 6 episodes left, 6 hours left. I got to assume that these 6 hours are going to be jam-packed if they plan on solving all of this stuff. Thanks for tuning in, guys. Later on in the week, I'm going to be doing a Thoughts We Thought You Didn't Think Of. Maybe my brother will join me. I wish he would have been here tonight because he had a lot to say about this episode, too. He could have at least helped me out through it because it was a hard one toward the end there. I know he's got some good ideas. I might get on social media and check out what the feel of the town is before we do our thoughts, like I usually do, so we can inject some new stuff into the conversation. And you guys subscribe to Rosenfield 10. You'll get more videos like this. People that love Twin Peaks and want to talk about it, and we give it to you real. We know what the heck we're talking about. We don't have to struggle with remembering character names and recollections of past works involving Twin Peaks. So that's one reason to tune in. Just deal with the audio and the video, and hope you guys like it. Subscribe to Rosenfield 10. Like, share if you want. Leave a message, a comment down below. Let me know anything you want to contradict. And tune in a couple of days for Thoughts We Thought You Didn't Think Of. I am Joe, and this has been Twin Peaks, Twin Perspective, and I'll see you in the trees. Bye.